There we are. So we are finally live. Welcome, everyone. It usually we wait a little bit for people to come in, so let's just wait a few minutes for people to hop in. But today we are going to be talking about managing cross team collaboration growth projects. So, in other words, what happens when a growth team actually needs to consume resources from other areas, or it does have an objective or an experiment that actually interferes with different departments of the company. I have been getting these questions over and over again. Hey, product teams never prioritize our growth experiment. So I have brought some two of the big names in the industry here, big companies, big names, big growth teams, to chat and share with us a little bit of their experiences in that field. So yeah, we are already 1 minute ahead. I think we can get started. So without further ado, Abhishek, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what is Flipkart for those who are not familiar with it, although I think that it's hard to believe.
Sure. So Flipkart is one of the largest e-commerce companies in India, and I think it would have, at least for folks outside India, I think when Walmart acquired Flipkart, that would have sort of caught the eye as well, right? So we have one of the highest, say, daily transactions happening as part of the Indian ecosystem, right? So I had customer growth and retention there. So yeah, that's part of what I do, and I've been sort of heading growth for various companies over the last more than 8 years now. I think I've been in this field now. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abhishek. And thanks for sharing, for joining us today. But John, what about you? What do you do? Where you work? For those who are not familiar with Heroku, although I also find that hard to believe.
No, definitely. First of all, I'm super excited to be here. And everyone, please ask your questions in the chat. We would love to address those. But about me, I was a developer in my past life and then moved to product for a while. But since last decade or so, I've been running and building growth organizations from ground up, both for product-led growth as well as tops-down sales-led motions. And currently, I'm at Heroku. So for those who don't know, Heroku is a platform as a service for developers. So where developers can actually deploy their application, host their application. Think of it as a layer above AWS, where you don't have to worry about any infrastructure, managing operating system, managing load balancers, but you just deploy your code, manage database services, and we do everything underneath for you. So no DevOps team, much easier, faster time to market. That's the value proposition for Heroku. And at Heroku, I run a growth team, which is a cross-functional growth team across product marketing and sales. And I'll go there a little bit more details during our discussion on how that helps. But just a brief intro about myself and what I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rajan. And I want to pick up on something that Abhishek said. So please correct me if I'm wrong here, but you mentioned that you're responsible for customer growth and retention, which leads to my question, which is, what is the structure? How are you guys organizing the structure of your growth team? Are you guys currently dividing that by growth lever? Like you are responsible for retention, someone else is responsible for acquisition, activation, referral. How do you guys actually structure the growth team at Flipkart?
Yeah, so at Flipkart, what we actually have is a horizontal team, right? So the team that I head is a central team which is responsible for gathering insights wherein we glean the customer behavior and we define various projects as to how do we want to drive customer acquisition as well as retention at scale, right? So I head the central sort of business team, and the way that we are structured is that we have partner teams wherein there are product platform teams where we interact with, and there are product leaders who would be heading, say, acquisition pod, retention pod, and there would be different platforms as well, right? So there would be, say, a platform which is responsible solely for how the content is shown up on the app, right? So a personalization pod, house CRM pod, pricing and promotions part and all that, right? So generally what we do is that we have a structure and wherein it's a equitable partnership, right? So we work towards a common goal. And I've seen that sort of different structures sort of work in different companies. So we have done a bit of research there as well. I think the sort of structure that we've built over the last 3-4 years, how we built up this sort of pod ground up, is it works more when everybody's aligned towards a common approach, right? So therein what we did is that there are partner teams which are platform dependent, and there would be partner teams which would be specifically responsible for these goals, right? Acquisition, retention, and all that. And we'll be working with all of the stakeholders. So it's more of a hub and spoke model, sort of.
Gotcha. And all right, so before I ask the next question, I was just gonna ask, hey, the same question for Rajan. How you guys actually structure the growth team at Heroku? Is that divided by growth levers? Is that divided by product? Is that divided by objective? How are you guys currently structured?
I mean, that's a great question, right? I mean, I've been at Heroku for 6 years, and I was the first person to start a growth team here. And since then, it has changed a lot. We've evolved a lot. And just to give you some perspective, I reported under the CMO, I reported under the CRO, and I reported under the CEO of Heroku over this last 6 years, depending on what part of the customer journey problem we were solving. And as we did that, the scope expanded. And when we started at Heroku, the biggest problem facing us was the top of the funnel. How do you grow the developer community, and how do you get them to sign up for the platform? And that's when I was reporting under the CMO, because that was like the biggest problem for us. As we solved that problem, the next problem was, now what do we do with all these freemium customers who have signed up? Like, how do you get them to get value out of the product? And then my team naturally started owning the activation and the engagement KPIs. And the monthly active user is something my team manages too. So we expanded the scope down the customer journey. And then once we solved that problem, the next thing was, now we have these engaged customers. How do you monetize from them? How do you get them to start paying us on a monthly basis? So my team started owning the revenue targets on the self-serve side. And then we started expanded the funnel on there. And as it expanded, my team owns the entire customer journey, from the KPIs on the top of the funnel, KPIs on the product engagement, activation, MAU, monetization, and the self-serve billings, and also a partnership with the sales team. As the customers get bigger, how do you generate more ACV with a land and expand motion in B2B SaaS? And as naturally, then retention also becomes part of it, because it plays across horizontally, as Abhishek said. Customer retention, dollar retention, everything comes under the purview. And the reason I explain that is, and the way I have organized the team is focused not on functions, but is focused on KPIs. We own the KPIs. There's a North Star KPI that we have is revenue. And then it's like, how do you derive that into multiple different sub KPIs? And how do you partner cross-functionally across product, across marketing, across sales, across customer success and engineering to achieve that? I think that's how we are structured, and we have found success. But I'll pause there, because I know that there are more questions which would allow me to go into detail later on.
Yeah, and I guess like what I take from both of your answers, and we have invited both of you guys to this chat because I know that both companies are working on different markets, and also like one is more B2C oriented, another is B2B oriented. So it's like complementary but different words, let's call it that way. And also share like Oracle, in my experience at helping companies implement, it's not actually like the majority of the times growth teams are not born as a dedicated growth teams, meaning I'm going to start hiring one growth hacker and then one designer and one programmer and one marketer and one data science exclusively for the growth team. And I'm going to create that from ground up. In my experience, it usually starts with a mixed structure team, and you start replying either for the CMO or for the CTO or for the CPO. And then as things evolve, as you prove the value of having a growth team, and you start to gather more resources, more time, more flexibility to get more challenging objectives and experiments, and then things starts to evolve. And I guess like what Rajan has just said, makes tons of sense because it follows exactly that path, right? Like you guys identified an issue, created a growth team, and as things evolved, you started to focus on different things. But I want to pick on something that you said, Rajan, which was like the first thing that you guys focused was actually on the acquisition side of things because you have identified a problem. I'm guessing Heroku already had a marketing team that was focused on acquiring new users. So how did that actually happen? Why marketing was not responsible for solving that challenge or problem that you guys have identified? You actually you guys got the idea of, hey, let's create a growth team for that. How did it actually happen? And the reason why I'm asking that is because a lot of people actually ask us, hey, how can I convince my C-level to actually create a growth team? How can I start that discussion internally? And I think that can be quite insightful.
No, I think that's a great point, right? I think one thing maybe I didn't clarify is that so when the top of the funnel or the acquisition was our problem, I was reporting to the CMO. So I became part of the marketing organization because that's the part of the problem we are solving. And before I joined, most of our acquisitions were either coming from events, word of mouth in the developer community, as well as some of our developer advocates doing a great job of doing that. And of course, some of the organic word of mouth and the SEO that we had. But a lot of the times, like we needed to think holistically, like what are the different levers in addition to these traditional marketing channels that we can get in front of our audience. And that's where I think I joined because of the scope of the role. And then we started expanding it, like paid acquisition completely made sense, but we did very differently. We worked with influencers, which is very unheard of in B2B world. Like B2C, yes, but we were following B2C and how to get that. We focused on influencers. We did partnerships with Y Combinator, accelerators, because that was our audience. Like startup companies were our audience who want to get out their application faster into market. So those are the things that we did in addition to like a traditional marketing organization. But we were still part of marketing as part of that. But we also worked with our product team on what are the product loops can we create to get the developers to build faster and get the value out of Heroku faster. So those were the things that we brought to table in addition to just the traditional marketing activities that we did before. But I was still part of the marketing organization and then because that was the problem we were solving at that point.
Makes tons of sense. In your case at Flipkart, Abhishek, you guys won retention, growth for customer and retention. Do you guys also have a customer service team? And how, like, if yes, how do you actually collaborate with one another? Is there an intersection in between it? Like you can count on them, they get involved in some steps of the process. How does that play out on a daily routine?
Sure, that's a great question actually. So I think that would be on top of many folks' minds as well. Evolution of this is key, right? So I think when any company sort of scales up, they would have different functions in place, right? So say acquisition retention is something what say Rajan also spoke about. Say there would be teams in place who would take care of say mobile acquisition, app installs, or things like that, right? Similarly, there is a customer service team, so their KPIs may not necessarily be, say, customer growth, acquisition, or say the North Star metrics. So every team would have their own North Star metrics, right? So for them, the customer NPS is key. While obviously that would indirectly lead to customer growth, they would mostly focus on how can we sort of have a very smooth customer experience as well, right? So like in terms of say customer returns, customer escalations, or can we actually make the entire connect to the customer very smooth, right? So does the customer actually have a delightful experience both pre-purchase and post-purchase, right? So that is the sort of KPIs that sort of the team handles. How we sort of interact with them is that see, the North Star metric of the company is monthly active customers, right? And there would be various derived metrics that would come for this North Star metric. Now, when you work with different teams, right? So it is on the central team, which is our team in this case, to sort of how do we position this metric and collaborate with the team so that it works both for them as well as for us, right? So that is sort of a win-win situation. So what we actually do is that we figure out a sort of a math to it in terms of if we are actually able to increase the NPS scores of customer by X amount, then this is the actual North Star metric moves by this much, right? So that is how we are actually able to leverage different partnerships with teams like customer success team, right? So that is the approach we generally follow with different platform teams. It generally helps in terms of moving everybody towards one common metric and sort of aligning the metric that they are following. Can we convert that to the North Star metric, right? So that is how we generally do. And we also work with them in terms of making them partners, right? It's so in generally in large companies and especially when you are a central team, right? Uh, it actually pays to make everybody an equal partner rather than it being a give and take situation or us going and telling them, you need to do this, you need to do that and all that. It makes more sense so that can we make actually them a partner in terms of working on the insights and figuring out the for a particular customer cohort, maybe the experience needs to be a little bit better, right? And what can we do to improve that, right? So that is the sort of process that we follow.
Perfect. Makes a lot of sense. Something that we hear from our clients, like a quite clever way to explain the difference between one another. And again, I guess like based on both of your answers, we can kind of assume that there is no one size fits it all model. Like just copy and paste, and this is going to work out for you. So you got to figure out how it's actually like that suits your own organization and its specifics of that organization, right? One thing that I heard that actually makes a lot of sense to me, and it makes easier for other areas to understand what growth is all about and how they can collaborate. And again, there's no right or wrong, right? But I love this approach, which is like if it's currently part of the process, then it belongs to the departments, like the marketing department, the product department, the customer service department. If it's something that it's not validated yet, if it's still a hypothesis, if it's something that it's currently not documented or part of the process is not on the OKRs, it first falls down under the growth team's responsibility, which is responsible for validating those assumptions. Once you got enough data to make a decision, then both words come together. Like you discuss like data, the growth team actually validated, gathered the data, concluded something, acquired a learning, then they get all that information and bring to the other department and say, hey, this is what we found out. What we are going to do with that data is up to all of us. But our role here is actually to help you guys make better and more informed decisions based on real data that we have gathered throughout our tasks. So I think that is a nice way to break things down, because we are in the growth world, so things makes tons of sense for us, but it might not for other departments, right? So and also like when we that leads me to the next question, which is something that both of you guys actually said, which is the KPIs and the structure of your strategy, in other words, right? Abhishek mentioned about the North Star metric. Rajan mentioned about the KPIs they were wanting. So my question is first for Rajan. How do you guys actually strategize growth? Like, is there a cadence of KPIs that you guys use? Do you guys use North Star metric, objectives, hypotheses? How do you organize that?
That's a great question, right? And over a period of time, it has evolved. So everyone has the North Star metric for us is ARR. It's how much customers are paying us, right? And the next level of the KPI is then how do you get the ARR? You get it from either customers paying through their credit card for B2B, or you get it working with the sales team to sign annual contracts. And then you figure out, yes, on the self-serve side, how do you get the customers to start paying? And that's the third level. You get more customers to the top of the funnel. You get them to do more things and activate them. Then you help them figure out the value prop for the paid plans, and you convert them into a paying customer. And the next is expansion of their monthly billings or monthly credit card, how much they pay. So those, like, you break it down into these different buckets across the customer journey and the different hierarchies. And then you identify where is the biggest roadblock. Like, what do we need the most? Are we getting a lot of the customers on the top of the funnel, but they are just dropping off after signing up and not doing anything? And that's the problem, like the adoption and activation team needs to focus on. And if we have the right adoption, but the customers are not paying us, how do you get them? What's the monetization problem? Is it the user experience problem? Is it the pricing packaging problem? And where are the customers dropping off? Based on those analysis, then you determine if we are able to increase the adoption by 1%, it's going to make X $100,000 of impact on our monthly recurring revenue. And that's the basis that we use to partner with different organizations on. This is the roadblock that we found at the third hierarchy level. But if we can put them back into our North Star and relate that, this is the impact that we're going to have if we are able to show an improvement. And that helps us with prioritization across the organization. Because then you have to say that if you fix this and if you build this, then you're going to get $100,000 monthly recurring revenue. But if you are doing something else, how do you prioritize that? Eventually, it's the biggest North Star in the long term that would help us prioritize. That's how we do that. And the KPI hierarchy structure actually helps us a lot in terms of where to focus, how to partner, and how to prioritize with the cross-functional organizations.
Awesome. And I love what you said, because I guess like having a clear KPI that you gotta achieve, like a success metric that you can focus on, not only help you better define what kind of experiments you're gonna run, but mostly it helps you say no to everything else.
Yeah.
Right? It helps you. It's easier to articulate with anyone else that comes to the growth team and say, "Hey, can you guys do this for us?" If it's not within the realm of responsibilities or focus of the growth team for that specific moment, then the answer is no. Not because I don't want you. It's just because it's not our focus right now. Right?
I think you said it right. Right, saying no is very important. And I learned from one of my previous managers. Is like he's a great boss, and he said that there will be only 5 things that would move the needle. Right? We need to identify those 5 things rather than running 100 different things to see what sticks. And I think that's where the growth team comes in and figures out what are these 5 things and how do you rally the entire organization around it. That's what makes an impact and makes a difference.
Awesome. Yeah. Is that similar to what you guys do, Abhishek? Are there differences in the way that you guys strategize growth? Or is that quite similar to Heroku?
Yeah, so I think this actually resonates well with B2C companies as well, right? So I think, as Rajan rightly mentioned, the key job of the growth team is also to take calls, right? So one is storytelling using data, right? So that is actually how you get the organization to rally behind a particular cause or a particular initiative, right? So that is one. Second is actually taking calls in terms of is it really worth it, right? Obviously, nobody would have the resources, even the teams that you're partnering with, nobody has the resources to run after 20 things or 30 things or whatever you would feel important, right? So I think it is very important to rally behind that one final metric. And also, right, obviously you have to partner with them too, so that it is sort of a win-win situation, as I mentioned earlier as well, right? So I think having those guardrail metrics in place, but having that one final win metric in place is very, very key to take those calls, right? It's actually good to concentrate your energies towards those few specific wins.
Makes tons of sense. And like, I guess moving along, I guess the question that like we got over and over again for this specific session was, hey, whenever I need to touch on something in the product, I need to go through my product team. And product teams, usually they have their own focus, they have their own priorities, their OKRs, things they gotta do. So sometimes that we are not getting the priority that we aim to have. And our experiments like take a lot longer to actually be deployed, or they don't actually go live. We need to go through code review, and that's like slow things down. So there are a bunch of different examples in which the growth team is not actually well aligned with the product team. Mostly like because regardless of where you're currently focused, if it's acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral, or whatever other growth lever that you might be responsible for or wanting at that specific point in time, there will always be one or other experiment that you can run through the product. So in your case, and starting with Abhishek, like, does that happens with you guys, and how do you overcome? Is there an obstacle, or do you have full support from the growth team? And last, how do you guys overcome any specific attrition or that might happen along the way?
So there are two approaches that we currently follow, actually, depending on the partner product team that we are working with, right? So as I mentioned, there would be, say, platform teams, wherein we would want to run those experiments, and there would be specific growth, say, acquisition or retention led partner product teams as well, right? Which would be sort of horizontal as well. So see, one is the growth culture, right? I think that mindset is very, very important to build as a culture within the company. So that is how we actually started to build the team within Flipkart as well. So when we started this team, it was more of, can we actually get the attention and the mindset of the leaders so that we are able to instill this form of ways of working uh, as a culture, essentially, right? So like thinking about a particular KPI metric, and every partner team needs to think along this direction and all that. See, growth essentially becomes a mindset. So it sort of flows top down, right? If your leaders are vested that this way of working has merit, then it's sort of easy to make this culture flow, right? So that is one, right? Essentially making experiments and proving a case and using that to influence the top-down hierarchy to make growth mindset a first-class citizen across everyone, right? So that is something that has really helped, and we have come a long way over the last 3 years, I think, since we have set up this function, and it is a journey, right? So this is something that I think if you take it from a journey perspective and take it step by step, I think that really helps long term to get everybody's mind, right? So that is one. And second is a platform approach wherein we also have an internal agile growth hacking team as well, which is a subset of all of this, right? So in general, what we do is wherein we see that there is a lot of juice. Okay, so there would be certain platforms where you see, there are a lot of experiments that we could probably do here, a lot of feature launches we could do here, a lot of room of things to do, right? It is better to sort of get them to mentor or your resources themselves, right? So you're not always dependent on them for speed, right? So essentially align on the KPI metric, but train your own teams to work on those platforms. So that is like pick and choose a battles, right? So essentially, if you know that there are certain platforms where you will need to do a lot of work and they will have their own KPIs, rather than get them to mentor your team so that they're able to make changes on the platforms, right? So that has actually helped us in a lot of agility as well.
Love that. Love it. That. And like, actually, two things that you said stick it to me. One is like, pick your battles wisely. That's super wise. Secondly, Abhishek, was about culture. And I think like, in my own personal opinion, it always comes down to that, because in other words, culture means that you are having support from mostly like all the levels above your head. Is there any specific habit or report or action that you guys usually take to ensure that other teams and other people at the organization are aware of what the growth team is doing and actually starts to build that culture step by step? Because again, as you mentioned, it's an ongoing process, right? It's always evolving and adapting. But in your case, is there any specific thing that you guys actually take to ensure that everyone is aware and the culture of experimentation is actually growing within the organization?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, right? So, what we essentially do here is that, as I said, right? So, partner teams are stakeholders, and it is up to the central growth team to make them equal partners and feel valued, right? So, essentially, whenever there are wins or whenever there are learnings, right? So, the way that those wins are mentioned, it is not the role of any single individual or the central growth team itself, right? It is equally important to give that recognition to all the folks that sort of enabled that win in place, right? So that is something that I've seen is that has brought a lot of culture of co-ownership, especially in Flipkart, right? So once you start doing that, giving people that importance and like making them equal stakeholders, celebrating the wins together, and like giving their importance across various forums, right? It is equally important to sort of recognize that contribution in various leadership forums. And you could have, say, even we do send out mailers company wide, which are which where we celebrate wins and all that, right? So it is very good to actually celebrate all the contributions to get that buy-in. And second is again that so the previous step to this would obviously be the database storytelling, right? How to get their buy-in as well, right? So again, one is celebrating the win, second is making them partners in the process itself. So what we have seen is that that actually is just 70% of the work, right? So it's like if you are working or solving towards a common problem which is affecting, so it is a company first culture and customer first culture that you actually want to sort of leverage on, right? And that is how great teams are made, right? That is how you generally hire. If a customer if a person is actually strong in terms of customer first thinking, company first thinking, and all that, so that is something what to leverage in terms of how you want to partner with the stakeholders, right? So I've generally seen these two approaches actually work for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I actually like one or two roundtables ago, we had Nicolas Garofalo from Automatic, and in that roundtable, he actually mentioned, like, I asked him what was the most underrated quality or skill set of a growth leader, and he mentioned that it was cheerleading, because that's the ability of actually promoting the wins and the loss and the people who actually got involved with each project. So I guess that makes a lot of sense. It goes in line with what you had said, like promoting the wins and what is happening around growth to the entire organization. It actually makes it more accessible for everyone else to be aware of what is going on, as well as participating when the time comes. I would love to hear from your point of view, Rajan, what happens at Heroku in terms of actually like getting people involved. At first, it's like, let's take the example of when you need collaboration from your product team in specific, but feel free to move along any other department if you feel like.
Yeah, and I think I've never seen a growth team or an organization where product team is able to execute on every project, they say, right? It's just not possible. And rightly so, they should not. I think that's their job to make sure that they're focusing on the right things too. For the most part, I think the number one thing that I believe in is like understand the ownership aspect of it. Like what are you responsible for and what is the product team responsible for? And generally that comes down to two things. One is I see product team as like value creators for the customer. What are the new values that they can create through new features and new products for our customers? And the role of the growth team is value realization for our customers. How do you get the customers to start using the new features that the product team is creating? How do you help them realize that value that they are creating? And that's the demarcation that I generally use to not overstep into like what the product teams are doing. In terms of the cross-functional collaboration side of it, the way we work generally is we come up with the value on the value realization side. We have our KPIs, which is a monthly active user. And the way we partner with our product team is it's a shared KPI where they are responsible for the drill down level of engagement in the new product or the feature that they are creating. So that creates like a push and pull, because now they are also aligned to increase the usage of the new products that they are creating, because they're creating new products for a reason. And for us, it also helps because the more they use the individual features, the more the overall monthly active user or the adoption of the product increases. So that's the shared KPI that we use between our product teams and ourselves. And what we generally lead in with, as Abhishek said, is like, what's in it for them if they do it, right? And it's like the more we are able to share the success of a specific product or a specific feature that they have built and how customers are using it with customer stories, as well as how it's impacting the overall North Star metric, that helps create that bond between the product team. Like, yes, they are doing something which would help me, versus they're only asking me to do something because they have a certain number to meet. And that always works really well, because what's in it for them, and how are you helping them is more important for me than how are we influencing the numbers that we are responsible for. So that's the collaboration aspect that we do. But overall, in terms of the prioritization, the way sometimes we approach is that we agree on a common goal for the quarter. For example, if the product team is launching a new product or a new feature, we agree on a product goal that by this quarter, we need to have X percentage of our users start using that feature. And that allows us to partner with them and be on high on their list of things they need to do. And now we are, rather than getting involved after the product launch, they involve us during the planning process of the product. How can we do that? How do we track the right things within the product? How do we get the loops so that the customers who are using this product can start using that? What are the things we can do with marketing? What are the things we can do with sales? I think that creates like a really good halo effect for us long before even the actual goal of impacting that number starts. So I think that's how we generally try to participate and partner with our product organization.
That's awesome, Rajan. And that actually reminded me of one question that we got from the audience, which is like, when multiple teams are involved into the same product, like you guys mentioned that you do have a shared KPI with the product team, which in my opinion, it's a kind of like the perfect way to get alignment in between different teams, right? The question from the audience is like, in terms of accountability, when multiple teams are collaborating and testing into the same thing, how you guys actually divide those responsibilities and make sure that you're not overstepping into one another's shoes?
I can go first. So actually, I think overlaps are good. I think I would actually vote for having overlaps in some KPIs, because then you get more air cover than trying to do everything by yourself. So there are two things, right? One is, you, based on the KPIs and the shared KPI, it should create an overlap in terms of how you partner together. And as I said in my previous example, like, monthly active user is the KPI that the growth team is responsible for, but we can't influence that by ourselves. So then we have a shared KPI with our product organization in terms of what are they responsible for. And they are responsible for the individual usage as well as engagement for their product areas, which accumulates to what we are responsible for. And I think that helps us like be on a shared goal, as well as like help us identify like there will be overlaps, like things that they do on the product side to help with the increased usage of their product. Things that we do in partnership with marketing, with sales, with customer success, that would also allow them to start using their product. So it's more of like we are all working towards one common goal, but we have our own individual KPIs that we are accountable for, and that all rolls up to the North Star metric. And that's how I think we work, and we try to work, at least to some extent.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it makes tons of sense. I love the way that the idea of shared and common metrics, even though and overlapping, like the overlapping in between one another. I guess, like in my own personal opinion, something that it's essential for these to actually work is the understanding from other departments about what they can expect from the growth team. If they starts to see you as like their counterpart or someone who is a danger for their KPIs or their work, then they're not going to be partnering up with you guys. But once they start to see you guys as a collaboration, as something that can push you further, then they tend to collaborate. Something that we have noticed with like when we are implementing onboarding growth projects into teams is like we usually tell them to democratize the access to ideas, suggestions, hypotheses, suggestions, and experiments, right? After all, like sales is like in the front line, talking to potential customers all day long. Customer service representatives are talking to customers all day long. So who better than they to actually suggest growth ideas, right? But once the growth team is born, usually if the company doesn't have a culture of experimentation yet, people are kind of afraid to suggest something and say, hey, if that goes wrong, I'm going to take the blame, like how that's going to play out. And once they start to understand that the downside of suggesting an idea is almost none, because if it doesn't work out, it's just part of the journey. But if it does work out, you're going to be carried along with their success, right? With their win. You're going to be responsible for that. So once they start to actually understand what is the role of the growth team among all of that, they start to collaborate a lot more, right? And get involved with the growth team. Which leads me to my next question, which is like there's multiple parts of the process that the rest of the organization can potentially get involved with. One of them is like suggesting growth ideas. The other one is suggesting like objectives or challenges or KPIs for the growth team to actually tackle, or problems for the growth team to actually solve, or even on the execution of experiments itself. And different organizations actually use that in different ways. Like Google has that famous 20% rule in which like developers could allocate 20% of their time to projects that were not part of their OKR. How does that work for you guys? Like, where is the intersection with the other growth teams? How they can get involved with growth? Are they are they able to suggest growth ideas? Are they able to run an experiment for you guys? How does that work at Flipkart, Akshay?
Yeah, so it is a fairly democratized process at our end in terms of like actually anybody on Flipkart can come and suggest an idea, right? Like this is something that we think that will benefit the company's KPI, and company's KPIs are actually open to all, right? So that sort of flows top down as well. So and what we have seen is that a lot of these KPIs overlap, right? And that is a good thing. So especially say in Flipkart's context for the e-commerce culture, the structure that we have is that there are different categories as well, and each of them would have their own team, right? So when I say category, there would be things like fashion or books or electronics or things like that, right? So they would have their own teams. They would have their own problems to solve, right? So they would come up with those ideas, and they would actually so reach out to us, right? So as a central team, and then we will actually collaborate together to flesh out the idea to see that whether it actually makes sense at a Flipkart level. Does it have enough merit? Have we thought of that idea from all angles? Is it going to take a lot of effort, short-term effort and basis? So we have a framework internally wherein we actually evaluate the effort estimate across the actual impact that it is going to generate, the time it is going to take in terms of implementation and all that, right? So we generally evaluate across that framework. So, and that is very open to everybody, right? So like the stack ranking sort of process is something which is very clean and transparent, so that everybody actually knows that every idea has a merit, but obviously resources being what they are, there would be an evaluation process, and we will figure out how to get it done at some point of time, right? Like so that is how we generally do. But yeah, I think it is a very fairly open culture, and the way that we've evolved over the last couple of years with the sort of say marketing that has been done for the growth team internally as well, right? So it is generally a problem solving team as well, right? And the collaboration culture that we have, so that actually helps us get a lot of ideas from everybody. Actually, even the product teams come up with those ideas, and category teams. So yeah, it's a very fairly transparent process.
I love that. And actually, picking on something that you said, like you mentioned that people can reach out to the growth team to actually suggest something and be part of that. Do you guys, is there like any specific process? Because I'm assuming that Flipkart does have a lot of employees. And before we actually went live, you also mentioned that you guys are working from home. People have the flexibility to sometimes work from the office. But it's hard to assume that everyone knows everyone at the company. So how can you actually, like, one of the things that we tell our clients is that for idea suggestions, the people who are not in the growth team, is not their responsibility to suggest a growth idea. So they need to constantly be reminded that they can suggest it. So is there any specific way or tactic that you guys use to keep reminding people that they can be a part of that and make it easier for them to suggest some ideas?
Yeah, so there are actually two things that we do. One is actually organize frequent hackathons, and hackathons is not just of implementation of a feature, right? It is also about idea generation. Like there would be problem statement of the month or of the quarter, so that we can actually get those juices flowing throughout the company, right? So that is something that generally keeps the growth and hacking culture at top of everybody's mind, right? So this is something that we do Flipkart at a Flipkart level, and obviously there is an alias that we have wherein everybody can drop in ideas even when there's a hackathon not in progress, right? And barring that, we actually send out frequent updates and in terms of what is the team doing and what has been implemented or what is the roadmap for the next few months and all that. And what we have seen is that, like, making that very transparent and sort of pervasive across the company actually gets us a lot of ideas as well, right? So for example, we get ideas from a lot of folks, different parts of areas who would have gotten this say newsletter, and who would have sort of been participating in hackathon, and they would have say come upon some idea a month later or something like that, right? So because of all these things, they actually have know now that there is a team in place and we can reach out to them at any point of time, right? So I've seen that keeping growth culture and the growth hacking team at top of minds for everybody in the company sort of helps in developing that culture.
I love that. Love that. I love the idea of hosting hackathon. We actually usually tell our customers that are just starting with Grow and working on building the culture, not only the strategy and the process and the tools, but the culture itself. To start, if there is a possibility, start by running a workshop where people can just throw ideas out there without any responsibility, without any thought if that's going to play out well or not. After all, growth team will always have the responsibility of actually filtering them all up, right? Like deciding what goes live, what is deployed, and what is not. So if you can fulfill your backlog with ideas from everyone, that's great, because they get a sense of being a part of that, and I guess that's the first step of actually building a culture, right? Yeah, thanks for sharing, Abhishek. And in your case, Rajan, how that works, like, how does other departments and people at the company can get involved with growth? They can get involved in it with idea suggestions, with objective KPIs definition, or running experiments. The cross collaboration, actually, like getting involved with the team. How does that work?
Yeah, and just like Abhishek said, right? I think it's an open culture where, like, I actually value suggestions from our sales team, from our customer success team, from our product team, and from our engineering team, because like they know the audience really well. They are talking to them, and in our case, the engineers are actually our target audience. So any suggestions coming from them is more valuable for me on how to improve the user experience and how to help our customers. So I actually value those recommendations a lot, and we have a public Slack channel where our entire growth team is, and anyone can join and provide the recommendation anytime. And in terms of like how we use that is, I generally have the team follow a quarterly roadmap. Because while we want to be agile, we also want to be focused on the big bets that we are solving. So every quarter we come up with what are the 3 big bets that we want to focus on this quarter, what are the KPIs it would impact, and what would be the overall outcome in terms of the North Star metric that we can achieve. And in that, then we look at all the experimentation ideas that other teams have provided us and see how do we prioritize that based on the effort and impact sizing estimate. And that's how generally I follow that. And again, like one of the values that I really follow is like how do you encourage everyone to think big, right? And how do we bet on some dreamy ideas that have unlimited upside? Because eventually, like a lot of your experiments are going to fail, but there would be some experiments that would be so successful that will make up for all the failed experiments, right? So how do you come up with that, and how do you encourage your team as well as the broader team to like think big, come up with some crazy ideas, and then we figure out the prioritization?
Yeah, it makes tons of sense. We actually we run a research, the state of growth, in which we interview some growth teams across the globe. Last year, I believe it was 3 or 4 thousand different growth teams replying to that research. And one correlation that we found was actually that the most successful teams were also the ones failing the most. And so that's kind of counterintuitive to understand. But the reason is you're failing in terms of experiments, not in terms of objectives and success metrics, right? So like the KPI that you're wanting or the expectation that people have on you, it's actually being achieved. You're delivering the success that was expected from the growth team. But to get there are some failures along the way. That's definitely going to happen. And I guess that's also part of the role of the growth team, right? Like you don't want the rest of the company failing as much as the growth team, so it's kind of the safe space to take bets, right? the more it's more flexibility than the rest. The rest of the company. And I also love what I'd say, like having a dedicated Slack channel just for growth. Something that we do internally is actually like every new idea that gets shared, every new idea that is suggested automatically gets shared on the Slack channel. So people can actually clap those ideas. And sometimes if like morale is a little bit down, and you want to get more company buy-in and engagement from other departments, you might filter or prioritize those ideas by the ones with more claps. So that helps me, like all of them actually feel that they are actually being prioritized, like their needs are being heard. So they're like those small things that are not part of the playbook, but it definitely really helps the growth team get that repercussion across the board, right?
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Something else like that has been asked by the audience was about if you guys had any specific set of tools that you would suggest that it's actually part of your routine of your management style that you would like to suggest for the audience. You want to start, Akshay?
Yeah, I think it would be more from there's no one size fits all tool. I would say that I think every growth team, the way that it would be structured, would have different sort of tools that they would be want to using, right? So like right from say project management tools like Jira, for example, to Slack, right? So to actually using some tools for measurement as well, right? So like say Optimizely and say Visory and all for like the digital marketing experimentation and all that. So I think there's no one size fits all. As part of Flipkart, actually, we have a lot of tools that we've developed over time in-house, right, in terms of measurement and all that. I think the one thing that I would say is that you choose the tools that would actually make your job very, very easy in terms of the KPIs that you would want to target, right? If you think there's a problem in terms of collaboration, then sort of invest in those tools. And if there's a problem in terms of measurement or like you're not getting the right data in place, maybe you're not able to say measure end-to-end funnel metrics or something like that, right? Probably invest there, right? So it depends, right? Like from company to company and the way the teams are structured.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I would only add that you don't need a lot of tools to actually get started. You can get started testing with your existing ones and like just build your stack as the need actually comes. But
and most used tools probably would be email and Excel actually.
Excel, it's actually like the tool that covers the whole spectrum, not only on growth, right? What would you say, Rajan, at Heroku, does that work the same? Is there any specific tip that you would like to share?
Yeah, and I completely agree with Abhishek, right? Like just piggyback on the tools that other teams use, right? Because the last thing you want to do while getting buy-in is also get them to adopt a new tool. How much you can get, how much you can adopt like what other teams are using in the organization, and just be consistent with that, because that would help you with collaboration. And at Salesforce, especially at Heroku, we use a lot of tools, but at the same time, like eventually it's Slack, it's Google Doc, Google Sheets, it's Google Slides, as well as our Looker dashboards or the Tableau dashboards now are some of the things that we use to collaborate. And of course, like there are other things, like there are tools that our engineering team uses, which are central to Salesforce. So if we need that, we need to use that tool if we need their help. So I would rather piggyback on the tools that other teams use, and if possible, integrate your tools with it. But if not, just don't worry about getting a new tool unless there is a buy-in at the other organization level or the team level around, like, yes, we agree to use this. This is going to be helpful for all of us.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So guys, we're coming close to the end here. I wanna, before we end this up, thank you so much for joining us. This has been super insightful. I guess like round table after round table, I always come to the conclusion that, again, there is no one single truth that works for all the companies, and there is no one size fits it all. But it's super helpful to understand how successful teams are doing so we can inspire and actually test things out at our own companies, right? See what plays out. I guess like one thing that it has been permanent through across every round table is the importance of actually having a growth culture or start building that from the ground up. Like it doesn't matter if you have if you have joined a company that is still not like embracing risk taking and failure and experimentation, etc. Start small. Start with something that you are highly confident that can work out well, get some wins, and then you start to build that from the ground up, right? More resources are going to come your way, and eventually you will have your own dedicated growth team. I guess we just got another question before we ended here, which is like the skill sets that you guys currently have available on your team. I know that Rajan mentioned that he's from a tech background. He used to be a developer before. So what else do you guys can count within your under the growth team, Rajan?
Yeah, and it has evolved over a period of time again, right? So there are a few things that I look generally for growth hires. One is like how analytical they are. How can they identify the problem, right? Because that's the number one thing. We need to identify the opportunities where we need to focus. The number two thing is for me is what area are they stronger in? Are they stronger? What part of the customer journey they are stronger at? Are they stronger in more of the adoption side of the world, more on the acquisition side of the world, or more on the tech stack side of the world? The third thing that I look for generally is how well then they can rally the entire company around what they want to do. I think that's also really important because they can't succeed on their own. As we discussed earlier, they need to get participation and buy-in from broader organizations. So these are the top three skills that I look for. And then depending on like what stage of the funnel that we are looking for, we would either get someone more technical who understands the audience, or someone who is well-versed with our marketing channels and who can help it, or someone who can work closer to the sales team and work with them on the expansion opportunity for our customers. So that's how I look for. But other things you can coach people, but I think these are the skills that I definitely look for when hiring for a new headcount.
Awesome. Is that kind of similar to what you do at Flipkart, Abhishek, or is there?
Yeah, so I resonate with what Rajan is saying, right? So in terms of subject matter expertise is something that it is good to have. It is not something that we definitely want somebody to have when somebody is joining, especially the growth team, right? So what we generally look at is that somebody who has the ability to connect the dots in terms of can he actually take a step back and look at how everything connects together, right? So can we leverage different parts of the ecosystem? And that is something he could have, say, shown, he or she could have shown actually in some previous experience, or like in terms of the way that that person goes about problem solving, right? So I think gleaning insights from data is another key thing that we look at, right? Because especially the way that we are structured, we have to figure out what part of the funnel to attack, right? So again, it's a horizontal team. Like it's not that you only have to attack either acquisition or retention or any other particular problem statement, right? It's more about where do you think there's an opportunity area? Are you able to identify that and like design a solution around it, right? So those are the capabilities we generally look at, and obviously storytelling, right? So that is key to get any stakeholder to sort of buy in into your vision, right? So storytelling capabilities are also something we generally look at in terms of when we're hiring.
Yeah, wonderful, guys. Thank you so much again for joining us. I want to thank you like for giving not only your sharing your expertise with us in the audience, but also sharing your time. I know that this is scarce and you guys have tons of things to do. Like both companies are growing super well, so I guess you're doing a great job as well. So thank you so much for sharing this. It has been super insightful. I want to give like last words for the audience. By the end of October, we will be hosting the Growth Hackers Conference. It will be a 5-day long event. Every morning there will be free talks. We will be covering SaaS, e-commerce, mobile apps, fintech services across all growth levers: acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral. And yeah, we would love to have you guys aboard with that as well. So a lot more to come. Rajan, if people wanted to connect with you or find you, where they should go?
LinkedIn. That's where I am.
Awesome. Any final words for the audience?
No, I think this has been super exciting, and it's a great discussion. And Pedro, I think our audience has asked some amazing questions. I get some of these questions so often in some of the other speaking events, but I think it completely makes sense because, as you said, there's no one size fits all, and the questions are always so interesting in terms of what the customer, what some of the users are looking for.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Rajan. Abhishek, in your case, if people wants to find you and connect with you.
Yeah, LinkedIn is the place to be, right? So yeah, and thanks so much for having us. I think it was a very fruitful discussion, and I hope it was useful for the audience as well. I also have a few takeaways from the examples that Rajan and you also gave, right? So yeah, it's been a learning session for me as well. But yeah, hopefully
Likewise.
It's the same for the audience.
No, likewise. You said it right, Abhishek.
Certainly it was super valuable to them as well. Thanks again, guys. See you all at the Growth Hackers Conference. Cheers.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.